Although countries insist on expanding the proportion of domestic currency settlement, some developing countries often prefer to use RMB for settlement, even if it has nothing to do with China. This is particularly notable in its application in Pakistan. Pakistan bought 750,000 barrels of crude oil from Russia at a discount. Kolam, director of National Power, confirmed that they paid the first batch of Russian oil bills in US dollars, but future trade will be fully settled in yuan. Kolam is full of expectations for the expansion of RMB settlement beyond oil. Pakistan attaches great importance to national conditions in actively promoting RMB settlement. The country's economy is on the verge of collapse due to its heavy dependence on imports of energy. However, as of May 19, the foreign exchange reserves of the Central Bank of Pakistan were only 4.163 billion US dollars, approximately RMB 29.63 billion. Using RMB as a fund for oil purchases can greatly reduce the risk of debt default, thereby helping Pakistan to ease economic pressure as much as possible. Perhaps confusingly, Russia's first batch of crude oil sales to Pakistan was settled in US dollars, despite Russia's support for settlements in renminbi. Russia needs to clarify that as of February this year, over 38% of all currency transactions were still conducted in US dollars, although the renminbi accounted for nearly 40%. The data, from Kommersant, shows that the dollar's position in the Russian currency market is very strong, so it will not be easy to get rid of the dollar's shackles. However, Russia still prefers to promote the ruble's international recognition when it has options. However, since the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the ruble's exchange rate has been erratic and has been on a roller coaster ride, leaving developing countries feeling insecure. Therefore, some countries, such as Brazil, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, require the use of RMB as a third-party currency when conducting business with Russia to reduce risks. Putin received a report from Russian officials, which mentioned that the liquidity of the renminbi is very good, and that developing countries prefer to use the renminbi for settlement. Russia now has to accept RMB, because how is the good circulation of RMB realized? The answer has always been on the surface. This is the credit of the Belt and Road Initiative. China has the largest foreign reserves at about $3.2 trillion. If the yuan is not used to support the development of trade and investment in countries along the Belt and Road, this initiative will still further strengthen the status of the US dollar. According to data from the People's Bank of China, in 2021, cross-border RMB payments between China and countries along the Belt and Road will increase by 19.6% to 5.42 trillion yuan. In addition, in terms of direct investment and trade in goods, cross-border RMB receipts and payments increased by 43.4% and 14.7% year-on-year respectively. By the end of that year, China and more than 10 countries along the route followed the RMB clearing mechanism strategy. Under the framework of the Belt and Road Initiative, many programs use Chinese loans to assist local infrastructure construction and invest in high-quality assets, thus consuming a lot of RMB. Obtaining the qualification of RMB clearing bank will provide more convenience for China and the counterparty to use RMB directly. Wholesale and retail, manufacturing and scientific research are one of China's key investment areas. According to statistics, in the first half of 2022, China's direct investment in countries along the Belt and Road has reached 65.03 billion yuan. The maturity and development of these investment projects will comprehensively promote the production capacity cooperation between China and the host country, and strengthen the construction of the industrial chain, creating good opportunities for the long-term international support of the RMB and ensuring its share in international settlement. It will not be easily erased. China has always adhered to the concept of rejuvenating the country through industry. Taking this opportunity, it will further expand its influence on the Belt and Road Initiative and promote common development. China has not only signed local currency swap agreements with more than 20 countries along the route, but it is also a way to directly export RMB. For example, China and Argentina signed a 130 billion yuan currency swap agreement in 2020, and at the beginning of the year, the Argentine Central Bank expanded the agreement with China, adding 35 billion yuan in funds. In May, Argentine Economy Minister Massa visited China and hoped to extend and expand the currency swap agreement again. Indeed, Argentina has a headache because of its 109% inflation rate, so the government turned to China for help. However, for China, this means that Argentina will use RMB for transactions, which objectively strengthens the circulation of RMB. Although the Belt and Road countries are not yet comparable to developed countries, This means that they have a broad space for development and also provide opportunities for the internationalization of the RMB. Many countries, such as Pakistan, have begun to require the use of RMB for settlement, which shows that the RMB has won more recognition. In the future, more countries may choose RMB as the settlement currency. Since the World Bank proposed a poverty line of $1 per person per day in the 1990 World Development Report, the World Bank has been using purchasing power parity, PPP, that is, an exchange rate that takes into account relative price differences across countries, to derive the international poverty line and estimates of global poverty. The international poverty line refers to the representative poverty line standard of the poorest countries in the world. Purchasing power parity is used to convert the poverty lines of different countries and the values of household income and consumption, the backbone of global poverty measurement, into the same currency. The international poverty line has risen over time largely because price levels have tended to rise. With the release of each new round of PPP, the World Bank has also continuously adjusted the international poverty line, from $1 per person per day, 1985 PPP, to $1.08, 1993 PPP, $1.25, 2005 PPP, and the current $1.90, 2011 PPP. Now we're going to make one more adjustment. In the fall of 2022, the World Bank will switch to using the 2017 PPP to calculate global poverty data. This follows the World Bank's 2020 release of a new round of PPPs based on price data collected by the International Comparison Project, ICP, in 2017. The new international poverty line will rise to $2.15, meaning anyone living on less than that per day will be considered extremely poor. It's important to point out, though, that the actual value of the international poverty line is largely unchanged, it's just expressed in new prices now. Keeping the actual value of the international poverty line constant is critical to maintaining the stability of the benchmark for UN Sustainable Development Goal, SDG, Goal 1 and the World Bank's first goal, both of which are about living in poverty. The low-lying population as a percentage of the global population. As poverty figures have changed significantly with each new round of PPPs, the Global Poverty Commission, headed by the late Sir Anthony Atkinson, has recommended that the World Bank do not update the international poverty line with the new PPP before the target year of the World Bank's poverty reduction work. In its response to the committee at the time, the World Bank said it plans to follow this recommendation, but also leaves open the possibility of using future ICP rounds to guide the setting of the international poverty line through 2030, provided the ICP's the methodology remained largely stable over at least 2 survey rounds to our satisfaction. So is this stability standard met? This criterion is met if viewed at the global or regional level. See the technical analysis provided in this paper and the impact of the new poverty line on the 2017 poverty data. This is one of the reasons why adopting the 2017 PPP had little effect on the extreme poverty data at the global level. However, as with every previous PPP revision, there have been some significant changes to the PPP at the national level. For some countries, moving from the 2011 PPP to the 2017 PPP would result in a large shift in the extreme poverty rate measures due to adjustments in purchasing power estimates. Some changes at the national level also reflect improvements in the quality of PPPs. For example, some countries used more price data for PPP calculations in 2017 than in 2011, and others started collecting price data for the first time in 2017, that is, they no longer need to use regression models to estimate PPP as before. Therefore, the decision to use the 2017 PPP data is in line with the principle of using better quality data as much as possible. In addition to the current international poverty line of $1.90 per person per day, the World Bank tracks representative poverty lines for lower middle-income countries, $3.20 per person per day, and upper middle-income countries, $5.50 per person per day. The latter will also be raised to $3.65 and $6.85, respectively. Following the recommendations of the Global Poverty Commission, the World Bank also uses 2 other complementary measures of poverty, the social poverty line, which reflects how the definition of poverty evolves as countries become richer, and the multidimensional poverty, which reflects monetary poverty in every way other than poverty. With the adoption of the PPP in 2017, the World Bank's social poverty line will also be updated. The measure of multidimensional poverty includes the international poverty line because it is used as a measure of monetary poverty. We will continue to use the 2011 PPP to calculate the main global poverty data until fall 2022. Afterwards, when the next Shared Prosperity Report is released, the main poverty data will be calculated using the 2017 PPP. But we will also publish the data estimated using the 2011 PPP on the Poverty and Inequality Data Platform, so that users can compare the data obtained using the PPP of different years. The photovoltaic industry conference was extremely lively. Last month's PV, there was a PV-SNEC conference. I don't know if you have heard of it. Lao Bai also participated in this photovoltaic industry conference. Describe the key words of this year's conference: hot, introverted, happy and hurt. The original rhythm is that everyone is full of expectations. However, after this meeting, everyone also formed a consensus. From the perspective of industrial research, this is precisely the perfect and true portrayal of the two aspects of the demand side and supply side of the photovoltaic industry. The demand side is full of stars, and the supply side is fighting fiercely. It's just that the industry conference was very lively. The analysts came back from the meeting and looked forward to new technologies in the industry that could bring some new growth. There can still be some small confirmations of partial rises in the photovoltaic sector. Unexpectedly, a thunderbolt came after the meeting. After the industry conference, the big players in the industry lowered the huge negative and intensified the price war. The leaders of the various sects in the industry have begun to punish the industry at this stage. Li Jinkyo of LONGI said bluntly, the overcapacity may be next month, the next quarter, or the second half of the year. Of course, it may not happen until next year, but the later it happens, the degree of the next round of overcapacity maybe it will become stronger. In the next 2 to 3 years, more than half of the enterprises will be eliminated. At Tonggui's shareholder meeting, Lu Hanyuan pointed out without hesitation, the second half of 2023 and the first half of 2024 will be the first round of relative surplus. In the first half of 2024, or even the whole year, polysilicon will there's an oversupply situation. Gao Jifen, chairman of Trina Solar, made it clear at the SNEC 16th, 2023, International Solar Photovoltaic and Smart Energy Conference, China's photovoltaic industry is facing 3 major challenges: overcapacity, technological iteration, and the international environment. Immediately, LONGI announced a sharp cut in the price of silicon wafers. The price of its monocrystalline silicon wafer P-type M10 150 thickness was lowered to 4.36 yuan, and the price of monocrystalline silicon wafer P-type M6 150 thickness was lowered to 3.81 yuan, which were respectively 30%/31% lower than the previous quotation. The giant TCL Zhonghuan announced a price cut, and the photovoltaic price war started in full swing. Tonight, TCL Zhonghuan announced the latest price of monocrystalline silicon wafers. Among them, the prices of 150 thick P-type silicon wafers of 218.2, 210, and 182 sizes are 5.78 yuan/piece, 5.35 yuan/piece, and 3.8 yuan/piece, compared with 20 days ago. The price reduction of its monocrystalline silicon wafer is between 16% and 24%. In the long run, compared with TCL Zhonghuan's quotation in early April, the price reduction of the above-mentioned silicon wafers has exceeded 40%, which can be called a cliff-like price reduction. 3. The trend of major companies in the photovoltaic sector can explain some problems. These big bosses also threw down thunder and lightning with practical actions. Trina Solar lost 16 centimeters in one reduction, and the company announced a buyback but failed to keep the stock price down, and it fell another 5%. This kind of K-line goes. Longi also fell all the way. But there are good reasons for both of them to continue to fall. ALONGI represents old technology, which is too large and difficult to transform. However, TNE was delisted from foreign capital and relisted in a shares, and the shareholders in it wanted to reduce their holdings. Microinverters have also been weakened. The main problem of microinverters is that the demand for household storage in Europe has begun to weaken. The Udon conflict in 22 years has led to a surge in natural gas and electricity prices in Europe. Ordinary households have begun to install photovoltaics and household storage and power generation. The price of natural gas in Europe has plummeted this year, and has basically fallen back to the level before the epidemic. European people's demand for household storage has weakened significantly. The trend of the photovoltaic sector is relatively good because the leader in the field of large-scale inverters is Sungrow, the field of HJT equipment is Meyway, the field of large-size silicon wafers is Zhonghuan, and the field of solar cells is Aizu and Junda. Regarding the overall surplus of the photovoltaic industry in 2023. Another classic saying is that in the past 18 years, domestic manufacturers have built a total of about 380 GW of full industry chain photovoltaic projects, and in the past 18 months, they have newly built more than 380 GW of full industry chain projects. As a result, it is bound to be another serious overcapacity. According to industry estimates, this year the world will only have a new installed capacity of about 400 GW at most. Under the background of oversupply, the prices of all aspects of photovoltaics have begun to decline sharply. For silicon materials and silicon wafers with relatively low technical content, the supply exceeds demand. Silicon materials have fallen to 100,000 yuan. The price drop that everyone predicted at the beginning with the increase in production has now become a reality. For example, N-type monocrystalline silicon wafers have fallen to 5 yuan/piece at 182, and N-type monocrystalline silicon wafers have dropped to 6.8 yuan/piece at 210. P-type batteries and components are also in excess. However, advanced production capacity is still in short supply. For example, despite the upstream price drop, the price of N-type cells remains firm. Silicon material, as one of the materials for battery cells, continues to drop in price, and the cost is low, while the inventory of N-type batteries is low and the sales are very good. At present, the supply of N-type TOPCon products is in short supply, and there is a significant premium compared with P-type. From 0.07 yuan/W at the beginning of the year, it gradually climbed to 0.11 yuan/W at present. In the future, with the continuous improvement of efficiency, the premium will be further enlarged. Currently, TOPCon batteries are in tight supply, and the premium to PERC batteries is RMB 0.1/above. In fact, it's more polite to say it. From a fundamental point of view, the current photovoltaic industry has indeed entered a period of crazy involution, with excess capacity in all links. In addition to the structural shortage of inner sand and EVA particles, other links, from silicon materials, silicon wafers, batteries, components, to photovoltaic glass and adhesive films, will be in a state of excess production capacity by the end of this year. At present, domestic lighting conditions are relatively poor, such as Yunnan, Guizhou and other places. Generally, about 1.55 yuan/W in these places is enough to meet the startup conditions of the project, so for most areas, basically 1.6 yuan/W can meet the startup conditions. State-owned enterprises and central enterprises will not completely decide whether to start a project based on the dimension of profitability, and factors such as target assessment must also be considered. Here, since last year, quartz sand has always been a heterogeneous subdivision of the photovoltaic industry chain. It has been in short supply and its price has been relatively firm. The price change of quartz sand, the price scale line of various types of quartz sand until the beginning of May is as follows. As for the rumors of production expansion in the market, the impact of production expansion cannot be seen when the time is too short. However, according to calculations by Shanghai Non-Ferrous Metals, after the production expansion of Unimin, the gap between supply and demand this year is expected to be about 2,870 tons. Although it is still in short supply, it is much smaller than the gap 2 months ago. At present, only Unimin of the United States, TQC of Norway and domestic quartz stocks in the world can stably produce high-purity quartz sand in large quantities. Among them, Unimin said 2 days ago that it will invest $200 million to expand its production capacity to twice that of last year by 2025. Before that, around February, the main point of view in the market was that the production expansion progress of 2 overseas quartz sand suppliers was not as good as expected, and the inner layer of the casserole must use imported quartz sand. This restricts the climbing progress of downstream enterprises' crystal pulling capacity. 5. The mainstream trend of technological development, the transition from P to N. At present, Photovoltaics are in the transition period from P-type batteries to N-type batteries, and those cross-border companies think that they have waited for the opportunity to get involved in photovoltaics. Many manufacturers want to change to TOPCon, thinking it is very simple, but the TOPCon battery manufacturing process has high barriers, which is actually much more difficult than imagined, and the related advanced production capacity of N-type is still scarce. On the component side, the average price of 182 and 210 single-sided monocrystalline PERC modules is between 1.63 to 1.65 UN/W, a decrease of 1.8%. The average price of 182 and 210 bifacial monocrystalline PERC modules is between 1.65 to 1.67 UN/W, a decrease 1.8%. Among the domestic N-type modules, the average price of 182 TOPCon double glass modules was 1.75 UN/W, and the average price of 210 HJT double glass modules was 1.87 UN/W, neither of which fell. Therefore, the result of the current industrial chain is that after the upstream plummeted, part of the profits were withheld from the battery segment, and the remaining profits mainly flowed to the component segment. In a number of recent domestic landmark projects, the proportion of N-type has exceeded 40%. N-type has gradually become the mainstream, and N-type is gradually replacing P-type. It is also in the process, and the progress is very fast. An industrial revolution is advancing rapidly. At present, the power of TOPCon single-sided modules mass-produced by leading companies has increased to more than 580 W, about 550 W for PERC with the same size, and it is likely to reach more than 600 W next year, with a slight increase in cost. In large, the premium of domestic N-type TOPCon modules to PERC modules has gradually climbed from 0.07 UN/W at the beginning of the year to 0.11 UN/W at present. In terms of technology route, in 2023, the efficiency will be increased to 26% plus by improving the quality of slurry, laser SE boron doping, front passivation and other processes, and at the same time continue to reduce costs through thinning, laser transfer printing or SMBB and other processes. In addition, HJT has made some breakthroughs in cost reduction, such as copper electroplating, silver-clad copper, microcrystalline, and light conversion film. Of course, the road to cost reduction still needs time. 6 Photovoltaics dominates the world, and the bloody involution history of China's manufacturing industry represents the growth. Those who hear it are shocked, and those who hear it cry. Anyone who knows a little about the photovoltaic industry must know that this industry is a tomb of heroes. How many iterations of the technology industry have been buried, and how many heroes have been buried? Photovoltaic is not good because it has strong periodic characteristics. When the industry is on the rise, they swarm up and increase the production capacity to a level that the whole world cannot digest. Once it turns into a down cycle, it will inevitably be accompanied by the collapse of a large number of enterprises. The cycle goes on, and the heroes are eliminated. Wuxi Suntec eventually went bankrupt, and Shi Zhengrong hid in Australia alone. Pengxiao Fengsaiwei was liquidated and fled to the United States after a struggle. Miao Lianshen was forced to spend all his assets to repay the debt due to Yingli's huge loss and reorganization. Harian went bankrupt and Yang Huai went to jail. The Hanergy department collapsed, and Li Hejun was taken away. The fate of the giants is still like this, and the outcome of small and medium-sized enterprises without scale and cost advantages can be imagined. Looking back on the development of photovoltaics in the past few years, demand-side expectations is a well-deserved main theme, which has driven the photovoltaic industry, including the capital market, all the way up and thriving. Huge demand space has also become a common saying among various leaders and experts when commenting on the photovoltaic industry. In the context of the current oversupply, the strong overseas demand has not been affected at all. Perhaps this is the secret of the long-lasting vitality of this industry. In terms of exporting countries, the European market has maintained a high degree of prosperity, and South Africa's demand for solar storage has exploded due to power shortages. In April, the national inverter export value was 6.85 billion yuan, plus 99.66% year-on-year, and minus 14.27% month-on-month. From January to April, the cumulative export of inverters was 28.272 billion yuan, a year-on-year plus 140.59%. The decline in exports in April was mainly due to the high base of rush installations in some overseas regions at the end of March and the increase in the proportion of domestic installations in April. The month-on-month decline basically coincided with the module data. The main theme of the photovoltaic industry remains unchanged. From demand-side expectations to supply-side competition. In other words, one of the themes of industry growth in the past 10 years is growth, while the other is fierce competition under technological iteration. In the past few years, we will see whose capital, production capacity, sales volume, and income have grown faster. In the next few years, we will see whose strategic layout, technical level, market share, and gross profit margin are better. Finally, let me say a thought-provoking one. Recently, the bigwigs in the industry have shouted that the industry is surplus. But in action, it secretly operates in the opposite direction. The photovoltaic industry, which was still clamoring for overcapacity last month, was slapped in the face by the successive announcements of production expansion announced by industry giants. On the evening of June 6, Tongwei announced that the company will invest in the construction of a 25 GW solar cell and 20 GW photovoltaic module project in Zhuangliu District, Chengdu. The project is expected to invest 10.5 billion yuan in fixed assets and will be constructed in two phases, one of which is annual production of 25 GW battery project, estimated investment in fixed assets of 7.5 billion yuan. The second phase is a module project with an annual output of 20 GW, and the estimated investment in fixed assets is 3 billion yuan. The first phase of the project is expected to be completed and put into operation in 2024, and the second phase of the project is expected to be completed and put into operation in 2025. On June 6, LONGi Green Energy announced that the company invested in the construction of an annual production of 20 GW monocrystalline silicon ingots, 24 GW monocrystalline cells and supporting projects in Xi'an, Shaanxi Province. The overall plan of the project is divided into three phases, of which the first phase is a project with an annual output of 20 GW monocrystalline silicon rods and 12 GW monocrystalline cells. The second phase is a project with an annual output of 12 GW monocrystalline cells, and the third phase is reserved for expansion and supporting industrial chains project. At the same time, the LONGi Global Innovation Center project will be built as supporting facilities, with a total investment of about 12.5 billion yuan. At the same time, JA Solar, Jinko Solar, and Trina Solar have also announced expansion plans. Within half a month, the expansion plans disclosed by the five giants reached 100 billion yuan. Now that the production capacity is already oversupplied, why did they collectively expand against the trend during the low tide of the industry? Perhaps this is an area worthy of our consideration? Perhaps industrial excess and the Matthew effect are two sides of the photovoltaic industry. All the answers will be revealed by the next industry cycle.